All right, everybody, welcome back to the Life Less Perfect podcast. I'm your host, Shauna G, and I am once again excited. I'm always excited to talk to my guests, but today I'm really excited to talk to Amy Wall, known as the Skin Tessa, the quantum aesthetician, as I would like to call her. Amy and I met in a really cool way in a trans surfing group that we're going to get into if you've never heard of that. Anyway, Amy, say hi to our audience.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Shauna, and hello to the woman on the other side of the screen or the other side of the audio. I'm excited to share my story.
And I'm excited to get into your story because it's a fascinating one. So, Amy, the whole sort of philosophy here of Life Less Perfect podcast is that life happens for us, not to us. And oftentimes we end up with adversities in life that I happen to believe that our soul chose before we ever even arrived here in these meat suits, as I like to call them. But anyway, maybe you can take me back a little ways and tell me a little bit of your Life Less Perfect story and how you ended up, sort of transurfing that and ending up here in this beautiful life that you're now living.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I can't think of a better subject or a better podcast to talk about my story because it's exactly what you said. I deeply onboarded the belief that, and I became aware of the fact that, and I chose to believe. And I chose to have the perspective, which anybody can navigate to. It's just a perspective that everything was happening for me and was in my best interest and was leading me to a different experience. And so once I onboarded that, it took away all of the fear and the anxiety. I mean, I'll tell you a little bit of the changes, but I went from somebody who was constantly in trauma and drama to now living a life that can only be described as magical. I've arrived and I am doing all the things that we say we want to do, right? I have the money, have the handsome, successful husband, have the car, have the house, have the dream life. And I have that dream life now. But it all started when my parents met in the elevator of the Hotel California
Oh my
in
God.
San Francisco during the Summer of Love.
Mm.
And they were doing the hippie scene and both escaping some trauma. My dad was from a very prominent Mormon family, and my mom was a highly sensitive artist that was raised in the middle of Stockton in like a labor union family with a lot of scarcity and restriction. And they were just two kids doing the best that they can, but living that hippie lifestyle. And I ended up being raised on a commune. And my life less perfect really starts then because just even as a young child, I looked around and it wasn't perfect for me. It was really scary. It was, being left alone quite a bit, like benign neglect. The hippies were off doing what they were doing, having their boogies and their consciousness gatherings, and the kids were sort of like feral and left to their own devices. So that just immediately was really scary for me as a kid. Along at the same time, though, they had all of sorts of books on consciousness in the bookshelf. So I was left alone a lot and I was reading a lot. So I was being raised by Paramahansa Yogananda and some of these bastions, Louise Hay of new age thought and self-help and consciousness. And so I was exposed to that at a very early age. That comes back into my story later on, but story just sort of was a story of scarcity and really being afraid of. My dad used to take me to movies about the Sandinistas and nuclear war. And when 3 Mile Island happened in the 70s, I didn't even think I was going to make it to be a teenager. I was just always feeling like the other shoe was going to drop and I was going to be snatched. And, I just did not have safety as a child, no safety. So when you're a girl that is raised with no safety and you're trying to blend in and trying to do all the things, codependency can arise, trauma bonding, low value, low self-esteem, choices that don't align with values. So I don't know if we want to get into the whole thing, but essentially I got into the beauty industry about 20 years ago, and the underbelly of the beauty industry and the part that I was a match for because I was raised with this was scarcity, competition, judgment, control, restriction. And at the same time, my life less perfect was inviting me to have these awakenings because I had to lean back on my consciousness upbringing to survive some very scary things, like being sued by a billionaire in my first business, and then having my husband go from being the chief of our fire department of our local town to being arrested on a federal conspiracy charge and facing life in prison. Those are a few of the things that happened along the way. And I went to the mailbox one day, and I always had a lot of fear around checking the mail. I don't know why, but checking my voicemail and checking the mail was like I was going to always find something really bad in the mail or on the voicemail ever since I was a little kid. So I hated getting the mail anyways, but I went to get the mail. I opened it up. It was a letter, and it was a bill for $17.9 million from the Kansas City government with a return envelope in it. Dun, 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 dun. And I left my body. I literally left my body. And I went completely numb. But even as I was going numb, and I remember walking outside and I was reeling, I was literally like reeling. A little voice in my head said, "This is not real. This is your money. This is what you have. Only somebody like you could handle this." And at the same time that that was happening, maybe even before that, I started remembering my consciousness things, and I just started talking to, like, my house went into foreclosure. That was the other thing that happened after the 2008 crash. We were building our dream house, and then we had a option our mortgage and yada, yada, yada. And I would talk to my house and I said, what should I do? And the house this sounds crazy, but the house led me to making phone call after phone call and reaching the president of Wells Fargo. And the Wells Fargo sold me my house back to me
Wow.
for $350,000 and forgave like over $400,000 worth of principal interest,
Wow.
or not principal interest, principal, forgave it. So I knew that I had powerful energetic ability. I started realizing, oh, because I was practicing all these consciousness things. So when the bill came in, luckily I just went from going numb and reeling to just like, okay, no, I've already onboarded that everything is happening for me, not to me. And so that really was a defining moment where I was like, this is my movie. And that might lead into transurfing.
Let- Let's talk about that a little, Amy, because you and I, that's how Amy and I met, was in a group called Reality Transurfing. And Reality Transurfing stems from a book by a Russian fellow named Vladimir Zealand. And it's quite a large tome, shall we say, of you take sort of the law of attraction and put it on steroids. And I would say that's what reality transurfing is. So you clearly were able to transurf and ride that wave right out of that situation. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit, Amy.
I'm trying to think of how I found transurfing, but I think what happened was I was in my Kindle
Hmm.
and Tufti was recommended to me, and somehow I got it, and I just immediately opened up to it. But I was not into transurfing at this time that I had to navigate all those crazy things. But if I took myself back to that, I did Landmark Forum when I was 17 years old. My mom was a self-help junkie. And from the energy of fixing and being bad and trying to get better. So I remember one thing from the Landmark Forum, and it was that anything that you place on a horizon becomes conscious and becomes available to you. I've talked to other people and they say they never remember that. That's what I took from it. I was 17. Okay. So I took that, and I took that if you opened up the lid of a box, you would open up the possibilities. So it's us putting lids on things and saying that they are the way that they are, that is limiting us. Also, before I met Transurfing, and I'm not sure if it was at the same time, kind of during the same time. Yeah, I think this was, but there's a book called Busting Loose from the Money Game, Robert Scheinfeld's book, and started talking about quantum physics and how this is all like patterns in the field. And that is something that really, really helped me. So I was consistently just sort of like stepping back, going into my center, opening up the lid on what it was, trying to open up possibilities, putting what I desired on the horizon, practicing bringing that horizon closer to me. And then, it just kind of unfolded step by step. But I would say transurfing really helped me finally, once and for all, understand perception and perspective as our magic wand. The magic wand of being, and that is what magic is actually about. And that leads into glamour in the beauty industry, if we want to get into that. But that everything is just a perspective. And that navigating, so instead of the box, moving around the circle and looking at things from all the different points of views, but not being codependent with that and like swaying around to everybody's point of view, but really picking your preferred perspective and then practicing looking as that perspective. But that little trick that I just talked about came from Parallel Universes of Self. That is my Bible. Frederick Dodson, Parallel Universes of Self. He taught me, and this is somewhat recently in the last 3 years, but first you look at what you desire, then you look as what you desire. Yeah. And that goes back to that inner mirror I was talking about.
Yeah. I've said it before on the podcast. We're all just sort of little radio transmitters running around emitting frequencies.
Yes.
And, that's it really is what it's all about. So if you
Yes.
say that you're emitting is one victim consciousness or fear consciousness or guilt or shame or any of those things, then, that's the reality we will indeed create. So,
Yeah, and it is. I mean, we've already known it's a little in the lexicon that perception is reality. We know that, but to really onboard that as a framework for living requires you to be not on automatic and asleep. And the transurfing teaches sort of a metaphor for being a snail or a muggle, right? We have to actually be like on and navigating. Because if we fall back asleep and we fall into the sway of the pendulums, then we have no power to use that perception as reality because we're numb, too numb to remember that it's the magic one. All of it is so simple and free.
so
So
true. And I love the pendulums that you mentioned that because I think that's probably what was one of my biggest takeaways from the transurfing experience is the pendulums. It was just like, oh my God, this is so true and so easy, like you said, and makes so much sense. And it's sort of swinging out in those pendulums, and that's what's sort of taking your energy. And it doesn't matter whether you think it's right or it's wrong, if it's just sucking your energy.
well, and you believe that you're thinking these thoughts too. So pendulum, for those of you who aren't familiar with the book, it refers to, I like to describe it as, do you know the Peanuts comic strip?
Yeah.
Snoopy Peanuts, and there's a character called Pigpen. And he's got the flies and the little haze following him around. That's like a pendulum. I also think that morphic fields are a good way to describe them. It's like all the thoughts, feelings, beliefs, judgments, projections, rejections, limitations, separations, computations, conclusions, confusions, and illusions that everybody has about one thing. That is a pendulum. So money is a pendulum, beauty, health is a pendulum, hormones are a pendulum. He teaches that there's sort of these negative things can come and gobble you up and you don't realize you're inside of them. And I agree they can. But if you think of them more like as the thought forms in the morphic fields, which morphic fields are a kind of either leading edge or like fringe scientific. Rupert Sheldrake, I believe, is the scientist. And it's like that concept that animals work within morphic fields. So if a rat in China gets taught a new skill, then rats in Australia are also showing that they've learned the new skills. So they're picking up on the field of information. And I think of them as sort of reality bubbles too. The trick with them is to just be interesting point of view. Oh, okay. If we realize that everything is just points of view, back to that perspective, yeah.
I love that. So let's quantum leap, shall we say, into how that led you into the beauty industry and sort of transitioned you to where you are now and applying these interesting concepts of quantum physics and light codes and energy and all of this stuff, and how you're working in the beauty industry now.
Okay, yeah. So back to the childhood of growing up on a commune, there was a lot of magic around. I was taught that you can see into anything more deeply through the use of psychedelics or through the use of consciousness. I became a nature witch when I was 3 years old by one of the women. There was like a revolutionary, like Jewish lesbian group of people that were there on the commune doing like moon rituals with us and like teaching us how to just to do all these things. And also at the same time, like fast forward when I get older, when I'm a teenager, I'm reading books like Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. And my mom was a nutritionist, so she was teaching me about ingredients. And my dad had a predilection for really high-end personal care. So everything else was sort of like we lived in a shack, but we had a Persian rug and like really nice linens and stereo equipment. So I think he was cosplaying being poor now that I look back on it, because he never was poor. He always had a very high-paying job. But that was kind of the thing, right? But I had like Weleda in the 80s, really nice quality, German ingredients and all the different good personal care. So I was reading the back of the personal care, the shampoo bottle, doing the Louise Hay mirror work, and I was healing myself from being abandoned. At that same time, I realized that I was beautiful. I realized other people found me beautiful, and I was. I mean, I could show you a picture of me from my senior portrait because I did not like the way they portrayed me at the school picture. So I hired like a, or I don't know how it happened. I had someone take my portrait with like a Hasselblad camera, black and white, and like you could just see that I saw myself like very strongly as a teenager. And so I always just had a thing for beauty. My hair was naturally curly, and I like realized if I put gel through it and like let it dry naturally, like it would make ring. There was this store in Mendocino, California, where I live called the Melting Pot, and he was this fabulous gay guy who gathered products from all over the world. So you had Kiehl's, and we had like a Mason Pearson hairbrushes and all of like the good like mineral makeup in the 80s and like beautiful hair sticks. It was an emporium of personal care. And I would go in there, and I started getting facials in the 80s. I started wearing sunscreen because I was also raised in Mexico part-time hippie family. So I was also like learning about the sun and staying out of the sun. And I don't wear sunscreen anymore. We can talk about that. But suffice it to say, I was interested in beauty. But I also, even though my dad didn't go to college, my dad, his brother was a chemist, and my grandmother was the salutarian at the private girls' school, and his grandpa was the superintendent of schools, and they were geologists and scientists and intellectuals, which is why I could read when I was 3, have this scientific part. But my dad never went to college, but it was made known to me that because of scarcity consciousness, I wasn't going to be able to go to college because he had a lot of self-judgment, and there was just, scarcity. There was no money for it. Plus, I was raised by wolves. He was never there. So he was working in San Francisco, and I was living 3.5 hours in the woods by myself. I was really good at school, but I didn't, follow through on things because I never really had anybody there. So I wasn't going to go to college. I kind of had an inkling that beauty would be my thing, but I was told that it wasn't good enough of a career, and you don't want to be standing there on behind somebody. And it was just like really looked down on as like a bad choice, and it would be a bad choice. And now I know why, because there's a lot of cultural implants around. I mean, it's beauty school dropouts. Like the girls are at beauty school, especially then, weren't able to go to college, which really was me because I did not have the self-esteem or the support to go. But that's the background. I had 20 years of hospitality, and between then, high-end, high-touch hospitality with one of my mentor from the last restaurant I worked at was Margaret Fox, who had a famous breakfast restaurant called Cafe Beaujolais, and she was part of the new California organic cuisine movement with Alice Waters, and she was always in magazines and was married to Peter Kump's son from Peter Kump's New York Cooking School, and Julia Child came in, and we were always in magazines, and we did high touch, high end luxury organic hospitality. And so I have 20 years of that. And then I decided, because I couldn't be, essentially I was still a waitress, and I was judging myself for that, but I was also was burnt out, and I was like having ideas coming out of me. Like I would download whole ideas for jewelry lines, and I tried to make jewelry, and then I made Christmas ornaments for a while, very creative. I was good at creating something out of nothing. So I thought to myself, Self, what can you do in Mendocino? Because I needed to stay here because I had a child with my high school boyfriend, and we were split up, and I needed to do co-parenting. So I needed to stay here. What could I do to make a living and be creative? And I thought, oh, I'll be a makeup artist because the wedding industry was starting. And I was just that girl who always knew what the best makeup was. Even though I don't wear a lot of makeup, I was gifted with aesthetic, right? So I became an esthetician. And that is when life really started to take a crazy turn, because I went from being a treasured, cherished member of a team where I worked at a very high level, made great money, was well respected, was a golden girl of my crew, and a beloved member of my community. I went into renting a room from my hairstylist, and encouraged me to get a room right out of beauty school, which I don't recommend to anybody. That I had no entrepreneurial experience. From that first booth rental on, it was nothing but trauma and drama, and being backstabbed, being competed with, being ideas stolen from.
Quite a competitive industry, I would
It's a
imagine.
very competitive industry. It's because it's all built on illusion. And underneath, women don't respect beauty because real beauty is vulnerable. Real beauty means people will hate you. Real beauty means that you have to be able to be seen, to be perceived. And so all of modern aesthetics is actually about homogenizing into a standard that keeps you completely locked away from your power.
Amy, but this is a really important point that you just
Yeah.
made. And my whole body's just going because, I'm a 59-year-old woman, and I'll tell you that the whole sort of major trauma in my life is about being seen and heard. And there's this perception that as women, especially move into a certain age, we become invisible. And I was really starting to buy into all of that, but there was something in me, the spirit just kept saying, you need to put yourself out there. And I mean, honestly, to this point, even doing this podcast is a big leap for me because I would rather just be behind the scenes. I'd rather just be kind of the girl behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I don't want to be seen. Really don't want to be in the spotlight at all. But I just keep getting told, now is our time. And I think as women, and especially, I think we carry in our DNA, we were talking about this earlier, this sort of witch wound. I've done past life regression things, and I don't care what anybody thinks now. If they think that's woo, that's fine. But I've had these lifetimes, I think, where I've been, whether it's working with natural medicines or being a healer, or, I mean, there wasn't that long ago where women were literally being drowned and burned and killed for these spiritual gifts, and I think that so many women get caught in this, right? We really get caught in this, and we're afraid to be seen, we're afraid to be heard. But now is our time. I fully, truly believe this, to stand into this power. We all know the archetypes of the maiden, the mother, and then all of a sudden there's the crone. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't feel like a crone just yet. There was an article I read, and I'm going to have to get the name, but she talked about this time being the maga, which means magician. And that's the years between 50 and 70 where we have the wisdom, right? And what is a witch anyway, but a wise woman? That's all the word really means. So we have these times between 50 and 70, which in my mind is 70 when you kind of hit the crone years, maybe even 80 now, where we just sort of sit in our wisdom. But now we're here and we can really have this wisdom that we can share, that we can really step into. We don't have to sort of prioritize children anymore. We have this time available to ourselves to really step into self-love and self-care and really being authentically ourselves. And so that's sort of what this podcast is about as well, and helping encourage women to sort of do that for themselves. Anyway, I just went off on a
No, I'm following your thread and I have so much to say.
yeah.
So I feel like there's a new archetype that needs to emerge between mother and crone, especially since we have the hormone conversation. And I have the hormones of a 38-year-old. So,
Yes.
if you want to ask me what my real beauty secret is, it's like,
Yes,
I
same.
don't know what I would look like without that, but also I work within the quantum mirror and a bunch of other stuff. So let's circle back to the number one thing, 1111 on my clock here, and that is the idea that women become invisible as they age. And I shared with you my framework of the three mirrors before we got on the call, which are still being sort of shown to me and downloaded, but I believe the only reason a woman becomes invisible is because she becomes invisible to herself, because she's looking in the borrowed mirror of other people's perceptions, and she may have fallen asleep and gotten on the downward beauty value spiral, which is that when we use a male gaze, and this brings into the patriarchy, and what has been hypnotized into us is that our value is based on we were literally some man's
Property.
freaking property 70 years ago. Like, I mean, come on. We have bought and sold the lie that our attractiveness sexually is the only value that we have. Now, consciously, we're not going around thinking that. It's just if we peel back the layers of invisibility, it's because we haven't been developing that relationship with the physical mirror and the inner mirror. And so we don't see ourselves anymore. And this is just like working with the physical mirror. You'd be surprised at how powerful it can be for being seen, just to start seeing yourself through the eyes of looking at your own eye contact, for instance, not even looking at any specifics, but just holding your own eye gaze, relaxing down your barriers and allowing yourself to be perceived in your glory, whatever that is, knowing that how people see you anyways is completely out of your control. We can never know it, but what we can know is that when people respond to us and we see their responses, that becomes our mirror. So when relationships are great, we're able to get on our Zooms to do our podcast, to show up and shine with our gifts. We know that you see you because you are seeing yourself, and you did navigate that transition of like, oh, you realize, you even said it, you realize, oh, I am being called to be more visible. So instead of going into the victimhood of like, I'm invisible, you didn't do that. You went right to, I am willing to show up and shine and be visible. Now, maybe we also need to update the idea of the crone, because I did find that once I stopped bleeding, life got so powerful for me, because no longer do women worry about me just pheromonally, right? Because we know that our hormones, cortisol, is communicable. So the pheromones are communicable, and just the how much more ease I have that I don't have to be attractive to men anymore for making them a baby. Even though that's just a subconscious thing, it feels so good. And men hold my door. Every time I walk into a room, people turn to look at me if I want them to. Most of the time, I go invisible because I love to be invisible. But if I ever need to make an impact in a room, in a conference, on a stage, on a Zoom, I can just turn it on like this. And I know I'll have it till the day I die because I learned that from my grandmother. And so that's the essence of glamour. It's just like turning on a light that people can actually see you. And you can actually change that to be a complete illusion. It can be with a filter. It could be all different things. If you have the capability of having it in person, that becomes an incredible tool to put into your toolbox. Because ultimately, if we get down to it, most women are just also women serving other people who have a mission, most women who are willing to like be visible, and actually all women who just want to be self-actualized. It's just one more tool. We don't have to be beautiful all the time. That's my secret. Like right now, I've got a medium plain sweatshirt type beauty on. I can turn that all the way up to Hollywood easily with just a few clothing things, earrings, a little bit of different makeup, not much, is most of a light thing, all the way down to a real average, plain, slightly overweight, middle-aged woman. Like I will play a spectrum of all of that. And when I allow myself to even perceive myself as not attractive, that allows me to dial up the other side even more. So that's a little secret for everybody. Don't be afraid to be ugly or to be invisible. It is a superpower.
Agreed. Agreed. I love those days.
It's like, I'm not putting on my beauty for you. I put it on for me.
Exactly, exactly. So Amy, tell us a little bit about how you're working with clients now, what your beauty model really looks like, and maybe some of the outcomes that you're having.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for asking. So it's always been my mission to shift and uplift the way a million women feel about themselves when they look in the mirror. And because I'm so clear about that, it's about this reflection and developing a relationship with our reflection. And my skincare practice has evolved to serve that outcome. It just so happens that the act of looking in the mirror and applying products is an incredible opportunity for reprogramming your cellular and spiritual energy. So I teach self-image reprogramming inside of a weekly self-pleasuring ritual that involves LED light, photodynamic therapy with methylene blue, and 24 karat gold spray. There's high level compounded topical skin nutrition with phosphatidylcholine and acetylglutathione and really bioavailable, the best formulas that you can get on the market. I also have like a high touch line that I include in the actual ritual. But generally, the way I work with my clients, like my women who are looking for a big result, is we work virtually and I send them the products and teach them the ritual and teach them the framework and then move them off into the world to go forth and prosper with beauty energy. Some of the results, the last client I worked with had an $85,000 facelift scheduled when we started working together, and I did not tell her to cancel that surgery. I said, let's get you prepped for that surgery because it's my awareness that what's happening in the plastic surgery world where there's a beauty dysmorphia that women are not able to see themselves anymore because they're taking the advice of the surgeon and the cosmetic injectors. So there's this real distortion and caricature that's starting to emerge from women that are getting a lot of plastic surgery. And I have discovered the reason why that happens, and I can prevent that by updating the inner image. So that's all we decided to do. I onboarded her. I used this really cool quantum acupressure one that's got scalar light that emits from a special measurement inside. I use biogeometry symbols, the photodynamic therapy. It seems very complex, but it all happens within one 30-minute ritual that you do at home. You don't have to do complicated face massages. You don't have to do big gua sha routines. You don't have to do things 3 to 4 times a week. You just do it once a week. And then your daily and nightly skin rituals are more about energetic hygiene and cleaning the day off. Obviously, washing your makeup off if you wash makeup, doing some skin food, but very easy 1 minute rituals where you connect with yourself in the mirror and use the energetic hygiene. But everything emanates from this once a week ritual. So I onboarded her on that. And she ended up canceling that surgery and having a huge result. Interestingly enough, my methodology works for everything. I just have beauty in the mirror as a purview, as a perspective, because I know how much pain I went through. I haven't even told the story about how I quit doing Botox and jumped off the downward beauty value spiral. But she ended up, when we were working together, she was living in the mountains of Sedona My technique that brings this whole thing together is called Magic Mirror Room. And it's a sanctuary we build in consciousness. And there's an inner mirror thing that's happening within a whole building that we build in consciousness. And I went to visit her at her new house. She's moved to Scottsdale. And I walked in and she lives in the Magic Mirror Room. She manifested the Magic Mirror Room as the house.
Nice.
Because there's like this doorway and there's this floor to ceiling windows and there's like this skylight and everything like has a setup. And I came to her house and I was like, Holly, you do realize you live at the Magic Mirror Room. So that was kind of an interesting side effect. So I work with my clients that way. It's just Zooms and products and facilitation. It usually lasts 6 months, depending on what the person's results are. But I'm a perfect match for the woman who is thinking of getting a little something done, but wants to create an energetic framework and an architecture for her beauty first. Because here's the truth, everyone. Products and procedures and practices are only tools, and you would not try to build a house. I'm married to a contractor, so maybe that's why I use these metaphors. But if you wanted to build a new house, which is the new face, you're not just going to give the carpenter like some hammer and nails and be like, here, this is what I want, build it. No, there needs to be architecture. There needs to be precise plans of exactly what we're doing. And we need to do that first, which often involves the excavation, the prepping, all of the foundational parts. Now, my challenge has been that unless you're very advanced in energy work and functional medicine and these types of fields, a lot of women out there don't even know how to use a moisturizer powerfully. So this work is pretty advanced for someone who's really willing to invest that time and to do the excavation and to learn that. So I've got that. I do work with clients that way. There's a free course at my website, higherselfbeauty.com, called The Radiant Woman's Ritual Reset, in which I tell you exactly with a beautiful workbook and a few videos of exactly how to transform your cluttered bathroom with bad energetic hygiene into a sacred beauty space where you can actually get some results in the mirror. And then I train other estheticians in my methodology because one of the big pieces of this is that the Magic Mirror Room and everything that I teach is also this beautiful soul service of a facial experience where women can have their faces like facilitated on this very deep level. So that's a little bit about how I work, but I'm highly accessible. I love to chat about beauty and energy and consciousness and anything else. But yeah, my life less perfect led me here. And if I did not onboard that everything was happening for me, not to me, I don't know where I would be. So thank you for that beautiful invitation and interviewing women like me. I don't know your story of your life less perfect, but we all are. We're in the battlefield. We're doing the thing. And I promise to anybody that's experiencing something scary, life-threatening, seemingly like just how could you get through it? You can get through it. And how you do it is getting very quiet and dropping into the center and starting to sort of see where life is responding to what's happening to you on the inside. See where you can go, oh, I'm a match for that. Not in a judgmental way, but like, oh, okay, I'm learning this. Okay, I see why this is happening. It's like that Hawaiian prayer, thank you, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me. It's like, yeah, I can't pronounce it, but it's like that idea of that you're taking responsibility for the part that you're playing in everything that you do.
That you brought up the Ho'oponopono prayer because I use that a lot with my clients in my practice. So
Beautiful. So the other thing from transurfing is that life is a mirror. That's what I finally just said, this is my fucking movie. So if life is presenting you a mirror that looks scary and is a life less perfect, instead of judging yourself, just drop into your center, notice what you notice, but most of all, see where you can identify where you have been aligned for this experience in a way that is teaching you something, helping you navigate away from something, because sometimes, like in my case, the really scary experience led me away from having the spa and doing beauty as normal. I would have never had the magical cottage arise in the fairyland had I not had that big awakening. So everything is just inviting you to a different possibility, opening up, expanding. And I think another really important thing that I onboarded that I think will be helpful for everybody is that we have been taught to judge our experience as good or bad, to judge our emotions as good or bad. Having a good day, having a bad day. I don't jive with that anymore. Yesterday, for 2 nights, I didn't sleep well, and it's not hormones because I have those adjusted, but it was energetic and world events, and I'm very tuned into lots of different things. I have an elderly cat who won't use a cat box anymore, and now she decided to pee on my brand new bathrobe, like a really expensive luxury cotton bathrobe, put it on that was covered in cat pee. And I sat there for a minute and I was like, is this a bad day? And I'm like, nope, moving on. So it was just, the invitation is that if we're not judging something as good or bad, and also being willing to be uncomfortable and to feel the pressures of different energies rushing in, and feeling comfortable as women to express ourselves with our thyroid, and we're everybody working with Shauna to get their thyroid checked, and being willing to express anger if we need to, being willing to express. And that leads back to the beauty industry, is that the truth of the matter is that beauty is energy, not an aesthetic or an age. When I was in my 40s doing Botox, I look much older than I do 10 years later. And if I didn't stop playing the beauty game like it was presented to me, I would never have opened up all of these opportunities. And the fact that I could get a wrinkle going on my forehead, or that I have expressions, does not dim my visibility at all. It doesn't make men like look at me less unless I want them to. And, suppressing our expressions and molding our aesthetic to fit the one of the standard of the day is one of the most disempowering things we can do as women. So if my story tells us anything, is that keeping on going to that next level, letting it unfold, just receiving what is showing up, being willing to let go of what you think it means about you, just continuing to go, where is the gift? And just letting it, things will change so rapidly if you work life like that. So that's my life less perfect. And I don't demand perfection to have magic. I just let life be, I try to meet life where it's at and be in the moment, and being the dot in my mirror as much as possible, being the dot in my reality. If I can leave one last little takeaway for your mostly women audience, I would imagine, is that one way you can start taking back your power is in the mirror for your morning skincare routine. By the way, the word care means stress, worry, grief, and we're not using that word anymore. I have skin nutrition, but for all intents and purposes, that's what we think of it as. When you go to brush your teeth or to put your skin product on, your facial formula on, don't do this while you brush your teeth. Finish brushing your teeth. Then go into a separate mirror, hopefully in a little alcove or a closet or a bedroom somewhere else. And the mirror is clean. When you put on your product, apply it mindfully, but we're going to take our mind sort of out of it. Hold your own eye contact and bring complete presence to your mirror. Just for that one moment, tap your product on with pretty firm tapping, like EFT, but with all your hands. Tap it in, open up all your cellular energy, and just invoke the I am presence. I am that. I am. So bringing in that divine presence in the morning, just tapping, holding eye contact, takes 1 minute, and you programmed the mirror with consciousness. Just that little part alone, highly recommend.
I love that so much. What a great way to begin your day. And it can be just a little mini meditation, even, right? I mean, we all think about meditation, we have to sit for an hour in this pose. And, I love that you can just
That I'm so aligned with that.
1 minute.
That doesn't know. The 20 minutes, no. Life has to be, it's the yoga of our life. Because yoga actually mean this is a whole tangent I will go nuts on because face yoga is such a just a travesty, I feel like, because they're teaching us like how to bend and staple our faces, never inviting us to understand why we would hate our face so much to try to get rid of these wrinkles and to move us through these masculine distortions without bringing in the true yoga, which is the yoking of the mind and the spirit and the body. So, yeah, beautiful.
Comments. Amazing. Well, Amy, I'm sure that we could talk for many, many hours, but I want to be respectful of your time and our audience's time. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm going to link all of the places where people can find you and the medicine and magic that you're bringing into the world. So we'll be sure and do that. And just any last words of beauty wisdom that you can give us.
You are the magic ingredient. It's you. You're the magic ingredient in all of your products and practices and procedures. It always was you. It was always you. You had the magic all along.